born in Lincoln, Nebraska. My parents were farmers. Grew up in Lincoln and went to schools there. I helped my dad on the farm until I was about 18, and then God was putting on my heart through a youth director, Merrill Bach, to really consider going into the ministry. So wasn't planning on going to college at that time, but then we went up to St. Paul, Minnesota as a youth group on a bus one time to visit a college up there called St. Paul Bible College. And that's when I knew that God had called me to go there. So I went up there in 1964. I started with a history degree. I worked there through 5 years. I drove school bus and a number of other things that I did. I worked at Billy Graham's, was head of their offices up there at that time. Worked a number of jobs. I met my lovely wife, Iris, of 50, where we married now for 57 years, up there going to school at St. Bible College. I then went to Bethel Theological Seminary, which is still in the Twin Cities. I love the Twin Cities. It was really wonderful. I loved the climate change, the snow, the winter, the heat, and even the mosquitoes in the summertime. And but in 1972, I finished my degree at Bethel Seminary, and so God led us to our first church, which was in New Berlin, Illinois, a small little community just west of Springfield. It was actually situated between Springfield and Jacksonville. 16 miles to Jacksonville, 16 miles to Springfield. And what's important about Springfield is that's where Abe Lincoln, you have all the stories. So when I was there for 3.5 years, we did all the touring of seeing all the sites where Lincoln lived there. And people would always come over and they'd want to, our family or friends, they want to go see the sites too. So we worked there for 3.5 years, and then God led us to our second church in New Berlin and in Calamasa, Yucaipa, where we were there for 19 years. It was a wonderful congregation of started out as older people, but we got a lot of young people and a lot of families, and it grew. Used to take the kids skiing in the wintertime because some of them had never been skiing, even though they lived very close to the mountains. They were only like 45 minutes away from a ski slope, but they'd never been there. The kids were kind of isolated in that community. I was a little league coach. I was very happy to coach my kids. I loved them, and I loved the sports doing that with them there. My boys all went to the same schools and high school. John and Lee did. They went all the way through the Yucaipa Calamasa system before God moved us to the church in Santa Monica. I was there then for 20 years in Santa Monica from 95 until 2015 when I retired from there. My wife was a math professor at Los Angeles City College. And then our grandchildren were up here in the East Bay area in San Ramon. So we started looking for a house and found this house in Walnut Creek that we really love. It's been really wonderful for us. When I came up here, then I also wanted to find out, what was happening in this community. And I first started going to a church called Cornerstone, which I knew from the times of the Cornerstone Church over in Livermore. And I found that it was really nice and things like that. But then we came up here and we started looking also for other churches. But it was through the Cornerstone Church here that I met LaShawn, and who told me about the Bible study that met on Thursdays, and at the bagel place, and that's where I met a lot of my friends. I really appreciated the men's Bible study there. And then my wife retired in 2020. We moved up here full time. I was up here for 2 years while she was down finishing her teaching in Los Angeles. And so it meant we had two places, one in LA and one up here. And that we would come up on the holidays and the weekends. I lived up here most of the time at our home. And finally, she retired in 2020, and then we've been up here ever since. Met a lot of people in the neighborhood, really great people up here, and love our community and love our family up here and their friends that we've met. It's been really terrific.
And so you said in LA you spent how many years pastoring?
I was a pastor for 42 years altogether. When you put New Berlin and that, because I started actually my first Sunday was in November of 1972. That's when we moved into there, take our church over and that in New Berlin. And then from there until I resigned and had a kind of a sabbatical at the end of my ministry, I retired officially on December the 30th of 2015. So it comes out to about 42 years that I was there.
Any situations that stand out versus other ones?
Oh, well, I love all the people. I mean, I had a really wonderful youth group. A lot of kids that I have, they still keep in contact with me from Calamasa. They're just wonderful. They're almost became kind of like my adopted kids in so many ways, even though they had parents and stuff like that of their own. But they were terrific. And then the church in Santa Monica was kind of a unique church because it was a huge facility. I mean, it was a facility that would hold 600 people on a Sunday morning in their auditorium in the balcony. And they used that in the movie The Father of the Bride. So I used to tell people, if you want to see the church that I pastored, go and watch The Father of the Bride with Steve Martin there, because that's where they filmed at the wedding and stuff, not anything outside, but the wedding there, because it was unique, and it was one of those large churches with the stained glass windows and the like. It was a good group of people that were there that I enjoyed very much. And so the thing that stands out the most for me is the relationships of people. I think people are important. I don't think we pay enough attention because that's what's really going to last is those relationships. It's not the things that you're going to donate to your kids, or your kids are going to call U-Haul or the junk man and get rid of stuff. It's really the relationships that you have with one another, because we're going to have those relationships in heaven. God has made us a relational people because he was relational. The Father loved the Son loved the Holy Spirit loved the Father. This triangle of love is just wonderful. And that's what really motivates us. And it's when you have those relationships with people, and you realize how important they are, and that you're going to spend eternity with these people. I kind of always wonder, well, if you're not going to spend eternity with somebody, why do you want to wait till you die and you get to heaven and you go, well, geez, I'm really sorry I didn't get to know you a little better, because we're all going to have that relationship in heaven. We'll be all of God's wonderful children and in heaven. And I think it's a wonderful thing to know that it should begin here and now. So if I would say what stands out, is I always like to say it's the people, because I can still see them, I can still hear their voice, I can still know that they're around, even though some of them have died. I know their chuckle. I can hear their voice, and they're just like wonderful memories. It's like a quilt. That's you just take a quilt and you make it out of blocks, and then each block is unique and different. And so the quilt really is the relationships that we have with each other. And I always think it's important also within families, of course, that those relationships are there.
Did you ever get anybody married or be the pastor for a marriage?
Did I ever marry anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to think. The one wedding that probably was unique was I told you they made the film The Father of the Bride there. Well, the guy who played the groom's father in the movie, his son wanted to get married. So his son chose our church because that's where they did the filming of The Father of the Bride. And so they came in, and of course they introduced themselves. So while we had a little break in the rehearsal, I went over to the groom's father, who played the groom's father in the movie. I said, "Well, I said, are you going to cry?" Because he had this handkerchief that he kind of took and dabbed on his cheek here when in the movie. I said, you going to dab your little cheek here at the movie?" He said, "No." He said, "My son can't pay me enough to do that." I always laughed about that. But that was one of the most unique weddings that I look back on and laugh. I never had any weddings in which I could do one blooper, but I did have one. A friend came over, a neighbor came over when I was in Calamasa, and they wanted an impromptu wedding. They walked into the church. They said, "We have our license here. We want you to come over to the VFW, and we want you to perform a marriage because our friends are going to come over there, and we'd like you to do it." And they lived in the neighborhood. They didn't go to the church, but they just said, "We need a pastor." So I said, "Sure." So I said, "You don't have to get dressed up or anything. Just come over." Well, I had my book and stuff like that, and I have all my notes and things like that I have because I have little cue cards. But I went through and I got to the end of the funeral, and I mean the wedding, and I said to the congregation, like I do at every wedding, I said, "It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you for the very first time, Mr. and Mrs. John Smith." And the guy turned around and looked at me. He says, "It would be the first time because I'm not John Smith." That was about the best. I chuckled about that one. But that was the only real goofy thing that I ever goofed up on. It was kind of a odd, odd thing anyway. No, it was a very wealthy town. I mean, they had all the movie stars. I mean, I got to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. I got to shake his hand. I mean, you run into people all the time. Used to run into Gina Davis at the Starbucks in Santa Monica. I mean, they were just all around you because they were like regular human beings too. They had to shop, they had to get things and stuff like that, so you'd run into them in the public. So it was a very very wealthy town. The people always used to the people who lived there, the older people, used to live there, and they'd always call it the People's Republic of Santa Monica because it was very socialistic in terms of reaching out. I mean, they were giving out free cell phones to the homeless. They were doing a lot of things for them, and so it really attracted a lot of them into the community.
Wow. Did for that? So did that church do that? They what?
They we tried to do what we could do, but it, it there was a lot of restrictions at time because the city didn't want so many people in there because what would happen is they would take over a park and then the kids and the adults couldn't use it because it was problematic. So they did allow people to do feeding times for them, but they had to leave. They had only like you had like an hour. So what our church did is there was a couple of things. We had a home called Harvest Home, which was a building or a large, very large house. It was probably a 10 or 12 room house, bedroom house that they had kind of converted and made into it. And this is for girls that were pregnant and who were tossed out of their house. They were on the street, pregnant. So they could come to Harvest Home and we would put them up at no cost. And then they would get any kind of assistance that the county would offer for them. And but then we would supplement it with the facilities and with everything there that we could provide them with, the furniture and the like, where they could come and then they could have their baby and they could stay and they would have classes on how to take care of an infant because some of these girls that was their first child. The other thing that we did was we used to there was another facility called Sunrise, and Sunrise was a ministry to people who had jobs and but they didn't have anything to eat, and so we would make up every day a sack lunch, sandwich, an apple, a drink, and also some type of little dessert that would go in a brown paper bag. We would make up, I think it was about 100 of them, and we would take them over to Sunrise, and then the Sunrise people would then distribute the lunches to the people as they were leaving for the day to go to their job. So they would at least have something in between because Sunrise gave them something in the morning and they gave them something in the evening, but there wasn't anything in that noon hour that the people were working. So we would do that, and I thought it was a great outreach that we had to try and help people, and our group was doing that. We had clothing drives that we did for people. We would collect socks. Socks were the most important thing for homeless people because they needed socks, and so we worked with the YMCA, and they would come and there was a kind of a health clinic that the Y had that was separate from any of the other parts, and we would give them socks, we would give them T-shirts, we would give them all kinds of things that they would need that they could then dispense out. So we became kind of a collections place in which we would then take that and we would say to people, if you do that, we took and people who would change their glasses, we would ask people if you got an old pair of glasses you can't wear anymore because you got a new pair, and the focus, donate them. So we would put them in a box that people would do, and we would send them off to Haiti, where the missionaries there would find people there who would be able to wear those glasses, and they could give them for free. So there was a number of things we did. I had another group of people. One of my dentist friends, Chuck Wood, he would take and grab a group of people, and they would go out and do dental work. And they did it really over around the world. They actually went over to not in Afghanistan, but in Pakistan over there, and they would work with people over there that came in from Afghanistan, and they would fix their teeth. They also did it when the time they went down to Guatemala, and the last they were doing was the trips to Guatemala, where they would go down and help the people back in the rural areas who couldn't get into the cities who needed help. And so some of those people would wind up walking for hours to come to get their teeth fixed for free. And that's what they would do. So Chuck would take and get two or three other dentist groups people, along with some of the people of our church. and fly down and or go down to Guatemala and help people down there. So there's a lot of ways that our church in Santa Monica really had a large outreach into the world.
Nice. Um, and then the other two churches, did you ever do outreach or anything for the community that?
Well, basically those things we had every year they would do so all the churches together would get together and do what was called a Thanksgiving dinner, where they would invite people to come over on Thanksgiving Day. You could come the day before and help set up. So they would set up the tables and chairs at the Santa Monica Convention Center, and there would be they would bring in turkeys. They would bring in, and all these things were cooked. What people would do is they would put their turkey in the oven and put it on a low temperature of like 200. And then they would get up in the morning when it was done. And then they would take the turkey and carve it up. And then they would take it over and they would leave it for the people to serve. So there were other people from other churches that would come in and help serve the meal. And so they would have all the trimmings of the Thanksgiving, the turkey, the potatoes and gravy, the cranberries, I mean, the pumpkin pie, all that you would have along with coffee and the like. And so we did outreach into the community like that. We also, one time when Billy Graham was in town, it was his last crusade actually, we took two buses loads of people over to the crusade over in at the Rose Bowl. And a number of them went forward and recommitted their life to Christ or accepted Christ for the first time. Because I believe it's important for people to make a choice for God.
Did you work with Billy Graham a lot?
No, we didn't because that was the only time we really had because his work was around the world and his like in New York and various other places. But his first crusade that he ever had was in L.A. It was because of all the newspaper a writer that really gave him Randolph Hearst. His newspaper was so impressed by the fact that this young guy had all this large group of people that were he was preaching on downtown L.A. He had a tent and everything, and so they you know uh, Randolph Hearst kind of really built up the story, so people had to come and see. And from that, Billy Graham launched really his ministry out of L.A. He was a college president at the time at Northwestern in Minneapolis before God led him into being that evangelist that went around the world. And I think we all know what his ministry does because it still goes on. Oh yeah, what Iris would always do, she always worked with the children's department. That was her ministry plus the pastor's wife, and she would help me with various events. Like, for example, we would host the people who served as leaders of the church. We would have them over for a thank you dinner at the parsonage, and we would have people come over and we would share a dinner and just thank them for their ministry and what they did at our church, how we so appreciated it. She worked a lot with the children's department, helping organize, helping choose like the Sunday school material. Also, then also of helping teaching them too, because she loved teaching, as was what really she did all of her life. She went back to school kind of later on in life in their early 40s, and she went and got her degree in math, and then she started teaching in high schools, and then eventually she finished up her career teaching at Los Angeles City College the last 20 years. But she would teach and she would help out, and she was really great as a partner, as a helper.
marriage counseling or anything like that? Marriage counseling?
Only when people would come in for, first of all, for getting married, I would have at least 3 or 4 sessions with them and counseling with them. Also, people would come in, as a pastor, they wanted to have some counseling with their pastor and ask, what do I do, or how do I handle this situation? You always get that as a pastor. I learned that some places you couldn't help them because they were beyond what I could do, and so I would recommend them to go on to another type of more advanced counselor that would be able to help them in terms of that. But you have to know what you can do and what you can't do in counseling. You have to know your limits because there are limits to what you can do.
How many people were you in charge with at churches? Like,
Okay, when the average attendance in Calamasa was probably about 75 to 80 people because it was a small town of 600. I thought it was just a laugh. I said, I think it was 600 included counting dogs, chickens, and goats because there weren't a whole lot of people at the time because it was kind of a drive through. But then they put in the freeway and it was much easier to get to uh, into New Berlin. And as a result of that, the city really grew after I left. But we had 75 or 80 people. It was good group of people. It was a new building that they built because the Presbyterian Church got struck by lightning and burned down in Bates, which was right next to New Berlin. So the Presbyterians and the Baptists came to make one really nice church. And then the church in um, Calamasa was a church probably about 250 or so. It started out, it was a very older congregation. But we had a lot of young people, young adults that came. I think our highest attendance was like 350. We were trying to put chairs up and everything because we just didn't have hardly the space for it. But that was probably our highest on a Easter Sunday. Everybody comes out on Easter Sunday. And then in New Berlin, I mean in Santa Monica, it was probably about 250 to 300 again. The problem at Santa Monica at the time was parking. It still is for the church because it's in the midst of a neighborhood and neighbors park their cars out there because the landlords either didn't put in parking underneath or they had more than one car. So they had to put the second car out on the street. So it became a battle really for who controlled what in there. And I think our church had like 70 parking spaces on the 2 lots that we had and street parking, which was not very much. I think that I counted really within one time it was like, I think 40 spots in the church, and then there was like maybe 30, 35 on the street. But that was if you walked for quite a while. But that was part of the stranglehold that we had a problem with. We had, people that would come, but then when they couldn't find parking, then they would, they'd wind up leaving.
that was,
Parking is so important in church growth.
yeah.
We didn't have that problem at Calamasa. The first church was New Berlin. Second church was Calamasa, Ukaipa. Calamasa, Ukaipa is one town. What separates the two towns of Ukaipa and Calamasa was the county line. The county line road went down on the um, north side of the community, so that the smaller side over here was Calamasa. The bigger side over here was Ukaipa, but they called it Ukaipa Calamasa because you couldn't tell really when you drove out one part of the town or the other unless you knew the where you were at in terms of the county line. That's actually what they had a road called County Line. And County Line on the one half, the east half, was in Calamasa. The west half was in Yucaipa. So you're constantly in and out of there. But then, like I said, the larger portion of the city was over in Yucaipa because it was just that way. But it really became a bedroom community for Redlands and San Bernardino. No, my two boys, John is he works for Mount St. Mary's College. He got a business degree, and then my son Lee, he went into the computer programming and working in that, and he spent a lot of his years doing that, and poor guy, he really worked a lot in terms of hours. But they both have really good, strong faith. Lee goes to church. He used to go a little more than he does now, but he still really has a great faith in the Lord, and so does our son John. John works for Mount St. Mary's College. He really likes his job. He gets along with the. He's part of the uh, administration there and part of the admissions there at Mount St. Mary's in uh, L.A.
Oh, it's in LA. I was thinking of St. Mary's.
Yeah, no, it's Mount St. Mary's down in L.A. It's a nursing school where they teach girls to become nurses, and so it's or some type of deal like that. Both of my boys are married. I have four grandchildren from our son Lee, and John and his wife Danelle have decided not to have kids. I mean, with my family,
Yeah.
yeah, the really great thing that we used to do, before they've taken it away now, but we used to be able to go up to the sequoias to Kings Canyon. And what they did at that time was the U.S. government would have a pastor. You could have 2 weeks, not in the same area, but you'd have to have 1 week in one area and then you move to the next area. Couldn't have any more than two. And what you would do is they would provide you a house or shelter. You had to provide your own food, your own clothes. They provided beds. So there was, enough in there for for family. There was at least 6 beds, and we really only needed like 3 or 4 of them. And what you had to do though is that you had to offer people a Sunday service in the amphitheater of the campground that you were in. So it meant on Friday you had to go around and pass out a flyer and just say, hey, we're having a church service today down at the amphitheater. You're welcome to come if you want to come. As no obligation. I didn't have to take any offering or anything like that. And generally, what people would come, and there would be somebody there that would be able to play a guitar or whatever. We'd have a little bit of singing. I had to preach a sermon, which is really tough to do when you're trying to preach in this sequoias because the surrounding area is so beautiful. You kind of like lose your audience
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's so beautiful and very meditative and the like. But we did that for years. And then what we'd be allowed to do on the other days of the week is we could go camping or hiking or whatever we want to do in the sequoias. We used to laugh because my kids were younger at that time, so they would get tired after walking for a while. So their comment was, well, well, Dad, carry me. So I carried him for a while. I said, you know what I'm going to do? When I'm 95, I'm going to say to you, hey, son, carry me, would you? Carry me. Because it's hard for me to walk. But they'll chuckle about that. but we had a great time with those days and the like, and we got to do that with our last son Nick. We got to go to the Yosemite, which was wonderful up there too. Well, we've been up there a number of times. Um, we went up there one time with just some friends up in the Sequoias, up in what's called Grants Grove, I think it's called, and we had a cabin up there. But it was a great time. I mean, we're not. I'm not really a camper. I mean, don't. I'm not a tent guy. I prefer a motel or hotel with nice soft beds. But when you get a chance to do that, it's nice to go roughing a little bit. The only thing is, you have to occasionally fight off the little critters come around, the mice and stuff like that. But it was fun. We enjoyed it with our kids when we were younger. I don't think I could do it today, but it was great for them. Well, I used to go back home to Nebraska a lot because for part of our vacation because we our family is very close. My brothers and I, and my parents and I, and my grandmother at the time. We're all very close. They used to have like Magee reunions, and they used to have like Pape reunions, which was my mother's side of the family. My father's side of the family was Magee, and we would meet up at a park, and we would have like a family share dish. So everybody would bring something, and then we'd put it out there, and then we'd all share in the meal. And so when we were going out in the ministry, I didn't want my boys to lose sight of the fact that they had aunts and uncles and cousins. So we would go to Nebraska and fly, and then of course the kids got to be out on the farm. They got to do the what do you call it? The swinging on the rope in the barn, and they got to they got to see the things in life. They got to shoot off fireworks. They got to shoot shotguns and the like, which was kind of a unique thing because you don't do that in California. And so it gave them a good chance. And so we'd go back there and we'd have watermelon and homemade ice cream and the like when we were there in Nebraska. And then also to go along with that, when I was moving from New Berlin to Yucaipa, Calamasa, my dad was sitting out in the garage in Lincoln. And I said to my dad, "Hey, Dad, I know who my grandfather is, your dad, because he died before my dad died. My grandfather died when my dad was 16, so none of us children were around. He wasn't even married to my mother." I said, "Do you know who your grandfather is?" And he said, "I don't know." I said, "I think it was John Magee." Well, that got me thinking that there was a lot of family history that was going missing. So I started collecting us together, and I made a roots book up of all of the family history going back, tracing the family line back as far as I could. I got them back finally to 1792 in New Hampshire, and and before that, it was 1754 in New Hampshire because my one great great grandfather was in the American Revolution. He fought with Washington. He was with the first New Hampshire volunteers, and so he. I learned a lot about that. I learned a lot about what they did. They were all farmers, and how long they lived and everything like that. It was a wonderful thing, a really great joy for me take some time and make up a family roots and discover who we are as I traced my father and my mother's lineage back. My mom's lineage goes back to Germany into the 1600s. And my dad's family, I still can't get them out of the United States. I have them back to 1754, but I can't somehow do that. I told my dad, I think some gorilla must have escaped, and that's how we must have come out and come into being. He just chuckled about it. No, my dad was a farmer. Well, all of my family were farmers. The first people to go into ministry were my older brother, Les, and my uncle, who was by marriage, Harley. They were two pastors. And then I felt God calling me to do that. My other brother, Don, was really in what I call the ministry anyway. He was a businessman in Lincoln, and he had a company in which he worked with a group of people, and they made septic tanks out of fiberglass, and they made laterals out of fiberglass, and he would use the plant for by a time a Bible study for his workers, and he had three or four of them who made commitments to Christ. I always felt like my brother, even though he didn't go into what I would call formal ministry, he he was very much as a pastor as there ever was. Because it's a matter of sharing your faith. And that's what my brothers did. My older brother became a conservative Baptist pastor, and my middle brother, Don, he went into the Christian Missionary Alliance, really.
So,
Me, I was in the American Baptist for a while, and then they left to form their own denomination called Transforming Ministries.
would you ever go, do any sermons or share at their churches?
What
Would you ever go to their churches and do sermons or share?
No, I didn't. And they didn't come to mine. But they would come and visit me. But we didn't swap any church pastors or anything like that.
Jesus Revolution type of things?
No, we never did any of that at all. I mean, I know that was the Jesus Revolution with Chuck Smith, and then with Greg Laurie. Not really. I mean, we knew of them certainly, and they certainly reached a lot of people for Christ. And Greg Laurie's still going on uh, with his crusades that he's doing, his harvest crusades that he does in L.A. and also New York and various other places now. I believe that you get gifts whether you like them or not. I didn't ask for this stuff, but God knew I was going to get it because that's just the way I'm made. He knew that, and I trust Him in things in life.
Yeah.
And it's all you can do. I mean, I wished I didn't have these things. I'd like to be a little more active. I'd like to be like one of the greeters at the church we go to, which is called Mission. But I can't do that because it's just not to the place that I can. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Solomon, where God.
No, I tell you, I haven't had any visions or anything like that. But I can tell you that I love listening to um, Tim Keller. Tim is a wonderful man. He's a Presbyterian pastor who pastored a church in the heart of Manhattan. And talk about a hard concrete place. It certainly would be one. But he had a marvelous ministry there, and he since passed on. And but I loved listening to him because I really learned a lot of things about myself and about the ministry I had, and I think that has been so helpful to me.
Kids?
Just four. My two oldest ones, Ethan and Isabel. Ethan has is a works in a clothing store down in near Livermore. He uh, he really likes his job, and my daughter Princess, my granddaughter, she is going to school over here at the Desert Valley or whatever it is out here off of out in Pleasant Hill area, and she's very bright and a wonderful young lady. My other two younger ones are still in high school. They're in California, um, Cal High, it's called, and they're going to school there. They're in 10th and ninth grade.
Nice.
My son is now working on his own. He's working trying to build his own Roblox game system.
Roblox gaming system?
Yeah, where you use the Roblox Foundation and you create a game.
Yeah.
I don't know any of that stuff, but he does, and he's enjoying it.
Um, has he ever tried to show you how it all works?
Have they ever tried to what?
Has he ever tried to show you how it all works?
No, I probably wouldn't understand it anymore. I'm good enough that if I can understand how to use the various parts of the computer for me, but as far as programming, no, I just can't. I'm not into that.
Do you feel that's helped you or others?
Yeah, I really do because we're visual people. I mean, you look at it when in the early teens on, it was the radio, and the radio is sound. It's not anything but sound. It's the audio of them trying to entertain you with programs, whether it be Gunsmoke or whether it be Mr. and Mrs. North, whatever the program you're watching or listening to. It would create imagination of it, but it wouldn't give you the visual. But then when television came along, radio began to disappear and television came into foreplay because people now could see something and hear something. I always say that there's five senses, all those five senses of hearing, touch, feeling, I forget all of them, sight and the like, but taste. That if you can experience really is what you need to experience to have really the fullness of everything. And what Catholics do is they have the incense swinging, so you get the smell. They have the preaching, which has the hearing, and they have the visibility of all the icons and stuff that they put in their churches. So they do a number of the, and then of course then the tasting comes with communion, which they use their wafer and stuff to say that's the body of Christ. Well, I think that as Protestants we lacked a lot of that because it wasn't until just recently. Now that we have all the things such as uh, the Microsoft, I forget the name of the program, because I used to use it all the time in my sermons. But you put things up visibly on the screen. Put scripture verses. You can put your notes. You put music, words of music up there on the screen, so people don't look out of a hymn book. They're looking up. And there's so many things that I think we have improved because we've gone from just straight preaching in a pulpit, because that's how I started out. I took my notes and my Bible into the pulpit. When I finished up my ministry in 2015, I had computers, I had programs that I had to make them up, and I had those PowerPoints, what I'm trying to think of, and all these programs and stuff like that. And as a matter of fact, when I grew up, I used to have commentaries, books, and I have them scattered all over my desk as I was looking up scriptures. Then they began to have a program called Logos and Word Search. And then I soon discovered that all my books that were up on the shelves were now in a computer program that I could open up all of them on my computer program. And I even had an easy way to find things. It would take me a while to go through the indexes and stuff in a book. All I would do was type in something and it would come up. It was like the fastest thing in the world. And you had so much more information that you could have. And that's why I say that technology today can be a real asset if you use it right, because it involves more than just hearing. You got to try to remember that church we should have more of hearing, tasting, feeling, sight, all taste, all of that stuff. We should have in our ministry that we could know, because God said, "Come and taste and see that I'm good." The idea was that experience everything.
Yeah.
So no, I'm glad for technology because it has made us a better place, but also it made us more of entertainment too. So you have to watch the fine line. And then you get into the social media, and of course, then everybody can, rat on you or do whatever. I feel so sorry for my grandkids because there's so much pressure out there in social media. I mean, it just, it can ruin a kid's for life. You see how a number of them react badly to it. Oh yeah, well, part of it is yeah, because we're not letting God into our lives, and I mean, people will now they pretty much get in the place of saying, well, my way is the best way for me, and I don't care what anybody else says. So there's no sense of family anymore. There's no sense of relationships anymore. It's always about me, 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 and how people think of me. And I really don't care what people think of me. I want to be me, but yet I want to love people, but I don't want people to say, well, if you don't love me the way I want you to love me, then we're not going to love you. Say I love you no matter what. And that's why I say that I think that we're going back by all this um, stuff that in America today that are going really away from what God has told us to do, and we will pay the price for it. It's just like gravity. I can't jump off of a 90-foot cliff and say, God, why did I die? I can't drive my car at 100 miles an hour into a bridge abutment and say to God, why did I die? Because you violated the certain laws of physics and mathematics. You know, gravity is gravity, and force is force. And it will always be that way. And the same thing is true for us. If you violate God's ways in His Word of what it tells you to live, you're going to pay the price. There's no doubt about that. And people in America sometimes now, I don't think they even realize the price that they're paying because they think they can get away with stuff. You never can. It always comes back. That's why the Bible says what's whispered in the quiet places will be shouted to the highest, And you look at all the politicians that they come out of office, like Kennedy, and everybody said hush hush about what Kennedy was doing in the White House with women and the like. And today it's all over the papers. And everybody knows about the immorality that they had.
Yeah.
So that's why I say that you can't hide stuff. You know, it will come out.
Anything
Just tell
for
them I love them. I love them very much. And I'm very proud of them. And I know that they've had a good training and good teaching from my son and daughter-in-law. And I know that they will do well in life. That doesn't mean necessarily them being rich and famous. It just means that they will be able to live a wonderful life as best they can.